Okay, so now we're going to do number six. So for number six, Bill took 6 hours to travel 93 kilometers. Part of the trip he biked at 15 kilometers per hour, and the remainder he walked at 6 kilometers per hour. How far did he bike slash walk? Okay, for this question, first we have to define pretty much what DRT would be on this chart. So I would say D would be, well, I'm going to have to change up the size of this to write. You know what? I'll write it over here. I would say D equals to distance, R equals to rate, and T equals to time. But I guess alternatively for rate, I would say an alternative to that would be speed. So pretty much distance, time, and speed because we see the units, right? So the units for time are going to be in, looks like hours. For rate, it looks like it's going to be kilometers per hour. And then the units for distance would be in kilometers here. This is just to help us understand the question a bit more. And if I were to fill in my chart, I know the rate for each of them, right? So the rate would be for bike, he biked at 15 kilometers per hour, right? So I can say rate would be 15. And then rate for walk would be 6 because 15 kilometers per hour and 6 kilometers per hour. Now, it says how far did he bike and walk. Okay, so I don't know how far he biked or walked for. But the distance itself would be, I say it'd be 15 and I use a variable to represent that. So how about 15x? And then for walk, I'd say 6y. And the reason I chose x and y is this. So first off, we have to understand one thing. How do we get our speed? And I'm not sure if you guys recall, but to get speed or rate, it would be distance divided by time. So I can say r equals to distance divided by time. Because if you think about it, distance is how many kilometers we walked or biked, and that's divided by time, how long it took. So that gets us a rate. So if we want distance, we can take our term here for r equals to d over t, take t, multiply it to r instead, and then get rid of t that way. So for example, I would go from here, I would take this equation, multiply it by t, and what I do to one, I have to do to the other. So I would multiply my r by t as well. And if I do that, I should be getting RT equals to D, which in this case is my distance. So if I let, for example, the first one you see D equals to 15x, well, I know 15 is my rate, so that's my R. That means the x has to be my time. So if that's the case, that means for T down here, I would put x, and for T down here for walk, I would put y. Because now pretty much I'm saying distance equals to my rate multiplied by my time. So I know my rate, it's 15 for bike. I don't know my time for bike. I say that's x. And I know my rate for walk, it's 6, but I don't know how much time it took. So that would be y. So that's why I have x and y. So if I want to clarify this more, I would say x equals time spent biking, and then y would equal time spent walking. And if I want to go even further, I can say 15x equals to distance spent biking. And that means 6y would equal to distance spent walking. And again, I figured this out. I figured this out because I know that my rate equals the distance over time. So that can form an equation. I multiplied t to both sides to cancel out t. So I have distance by itself. And I found out that distance equals to the rate or the speed at which I'm traveling by multiplied by how long I'm traveling by. So that's how I got 15x equals distance spent biking and 6y equals to distance spent walking. And again, x equals to time spent biking and y equals to time spent walking. Now from here, I already have my equations like set out, right? So I can write what my equations are. So my equations would be 15x plus 6y, and that equals to about 93, I'd say. Yeah, so we know we took 8 hours to travel 93 kilometers. We just don't know how many hours of that was spent biking and how many hours of that was spent walking. But we know that for the distance, he did travel 93 kilometers. So I'll say 15x plus 6y equals to 93 kilometers. And that could be my first equation. Now the second equation that I can form would just be for the time, I suppose. So I can just say x plus y equals to 8, because I know he traveled for 8 hours, but I just don't know how long in that 8 hours, how long did he bike for and how long did he walk for. So these would be my two equations that I have to look at. So I can say this would be equation 1 and this would be equation 2. Okay, now that I have my equations, let's manipulate one of them and solve for the other. In this case, I think it's easier to manipulate for equation 2. So let's do that. So for equation 2, I have x plus y equals to 8. And I think I'm going to manipulate for y. So let's subtract x from both sides. And if I do that, I should be left with y equals to negative x plus 8. So that's my second equation. Now I'm going to plug in that equation into equation 1. So if I do that, equation 1 is 15x plus 6y equals to 93. Let's plug in equation 2 into that. So I would have 15x plus 6 negative x plus 8 equal to 93. So now let's simplify down. So I would multiply everything I have inside my bracket. So 6 times negative x should be negative 6x. 6 times 8 would be plus 48. And that equals to 93. Now I want to add up my like terms. So in this case, 15x minus 6x. That should get me 9x plus 48 equals to 93. From here, let's try to isolate for x. So I'll start by subtracting 48 from both sides. If I do that, I should be left with 9x equals to 93 minus 48, which in this case would be 45. Now I want to divide every term by 9 so that I have x by itself. So I'll divide every term by 9, and in this case I would have x equals to 45 divided by 9, which should just be 5. So that's one of my answers right here. One of my answers is just x equals to 5. So now let's solve for y. For y, I say we plug it back into our equation 2 that I manipulated for. So let's plug it into this one here. So I would have y equals to negative x plus 8. I know my value of x, so that'd be negative, and then I put in my value of x, which is 5, and then I plus 8. So I have y equals to negative 5 plus 8, which should just be 3. So the answer I'm getting is 5 and 3, which means that Bill biked for 5 hours and walked for 3 hours, because again, I have somewhere, I'll write it somewhere here, x equals to 5 and y equals to 3. And if x and y satisfy both equation 1 and 2, then they would be the solutions to this system of equations.